Hello and welcome. Today we're going to look at X-Plane 11.50, the beta number 10, and the FlightFactor 757-200 aircraft from FlightFactor and Step to Sky, as well as a few plugins I'm running and Navigraph charts and nav data. But this is going to be a quick shuttle flight from, I think we're in Boston at the moment. We are, and we will do a quick, probably 45-minute shuttle flight to LaGuardia in New York City. And I'm gonna not sit and follow checklists to the T, but instead kinda wing it, as they say. And I last landed this aircraft and I think I turned everything off, so we'll just treat it as such. We've got chocks, GPU, fuel truck, and a fuel gate configuration, and we have the left front hatch open. And 6,500 kilograms of fuel is appropriate for this flight. I've said 100 passengers and about 25 kilograms of cargo. And we'll see what that looks like and feels like. Do maintenance to make sure that the fluids are filled and anything that's broken is fixed. And then we'll load the aircraft. I usually power on before I do that, but we're on ground power. We'll get everything basically ready. Now, turning these IRS to nav mode is important, as is setting your position in the FMC sooner rather than later is also important. And you just come here and do what I just did. The way these work is whatever is on this line, if I click that button, it copies it to your, I think they call it a scratch pad, and now wherever I click, it'll fill that in, which is what I just did quickly. And now I have that in my scratch pad and I gotta get rid of it. And I said we're gonna go from KBOS to KLGA. And we don't know what runway we're gonna take yet, so we're gonna go ahead and listen.
General Edward Lawrence Logan,
set our altimeters.
Oscar. 1900 Zulu weather. Wind 080 at 12. Visibility more than 10. Sky conditions 2,900 few, 20,000 scattered, 25,000 broken. Temperature 17, dew point 13. Altimeter 3010. Arriving runways 04 right, 09, 15 left. Departing runways 15 right, 09, 15 left. Advise on initial contact you have Oscar.
We'll take 15 right. So we'll put that in right here. Now we don't have any legs. That can be a bit confusing at first. Activate it. We still don't have any legs. That's okay though. You'll see why as we proceed into the performance init screen. Gross weight, hit that button and it takes it from the plane. We've already got our fuel loaded, so it's accurate at that point. The fuel is automatic. ZFW 0. Fuel weight is automatic. Reserves is not automatic. And just to get the aircraft working and autopilot working, put 1 in there. How to actually calculate and put the right fuel reserves, you can certainly look that up and do that. We're going to fly at 25,000. And same thing for cost index, put a 1. If you don't do that, you're going to find some aspects of the navigation don't work. Flaps I usually take off with 15 degrees. We need the outside air, 17 right now, Celsius. CG, you just click that and it populates it automatically. which is also here. And that happened because of the fuel we chose, the passengers and the cargo, and how they're randomly distributed amongst the aircraft. But once we have all of this in, now we have our trim value is 2.9. That's the proper trim to take off under these weighting and center of gravity conditions. So you'll see I'm moving the stabilizer trim right now, setting it to 2.9. That's probably 3, so we'll say that's 2.9. And then you want to click each one of these. That's like saying, okay, I'll take your recommendations. And the V2 speed is 131. That's important. That's when you rotate back. And you notice that it got populated here. That happened when we did all of this. Our runway, we'll keep our attention here. And actually, we're done there. Legs is empty. We'll come back to that. 15 right has a heading of actually 150, which is nice. Doesn't always match exactly the runway name, so you always look at the charts. And we're going to cruise at, what did I say, 25,000. And make sure that's engaged. Your flight directors are on. And at this point, it's probably improper, inappropriate, but I was going to say you should be able to engage your LNAV and VNAV right here, but apparently you can't. I usually do that while I taxi, so we'll come back to that. We don't need this approach, we don't need that, but we do need, what did we need over here? Yes, we needed to get a departure. And the PATS 5 departure is usually the best to take coming from Boston towards south of Boston and towards the east, which obviously is the direction we're going. And you really should review these and be familiar. It's basically saying if you're coming from 15 right, here's what you do. Climb to heading 150, intercept this course to Fox. Do not exceed 210 knots until 520. What does that even mean? Then on depicted route to PATS. Well, what it's basically saying is you're going to take off from 15, then you're going to veer on 131 radial to Fox, and that 520 thing it was talking about, I think that's 520 feet above the ground, I think. But you should always review your charts and be familiar with the route and what's expected of you, because you are required to follow them. But the good news is, once we put that in the FMC, and it says perf VNAV is not available, so we'll come back to that. We have to put our departure. KBOS departures is what comes up when you say departure. PATS 5 isn't here. Well, it actually is. Hit next page until you find it. It doesn't have a transition, so we don't have to worry about that. And we're coming from 15 and it's not here. Actually, it is. And it's already active because we already put that in. But I'm going to go ahead and select it anyway to make sure that we get everything we need. Now, you'll see the legs holds some stuff, including that 520 point. I think that they said right here, then there's that 131 track to Fox. So it's all here, and it's all good, because we're going to let the autopilot follow the route, and that's probably why I couldn't engage LNAV before and VNAV, and now I can. If you can't do that at this point, then you've probably made a mistake, and more than likely the mistake you've made is going to be on the performance. One of these is probably not filled in, more than likely, or on the takeoff screen, maybe you didn't fill out your stuff here like we just did. But assuming you did, and you put in the departure, now you got some legs. the reason we didn't have any legs from KBOS to LGA is you'll see it's nothing but the departure from KBOS, and then we pick up the arrival to KLGA. There's not any specific navigation points between those. It's because it's such a short route. And we don't know yet what runway we're going to get, but we're going to go ahead and put the arrival in. We're still on departures. Go back to index. Go to KLGA arrival. And Nabi 5 is a good one. And that's what we'll follow. We'll bring up KLGA. Love Aviator's tablet. We'll come back to the ATIS because we're not ready for that. We're going to arrive via Nabi 5, show you what that looks like. It's basically, Boston is, well, here we are right there. So it's, Pats is going to end us about right here. And the next thing we're going to do is pick up this arrival via BAF. And that's going to bring us over and then down into the New York airspace from the north. And then by the time we get somewhere about right here, we should find out what our runway is going to be and start thinking about our approach. But for now, we just want to put in Nabi 5 from BAF. And it's saying what runways. Well, we don't know yet, so we're going to leave that blank. And now activate it and look at your legs. There's a discontinuity between the end of the departure and the beginning of the arrival. Well, we're actually not going to fly anything in between those, so we're going to remove that discontinuity just like you saw me do. And now we hit execute. We don't have any discontinuities, and we're good to go. And we probably should have called for our pushback. Let's look at the airport. So we need to come straight back and point that way. Better pushback is great. Pre-plan the pushback. We're going to come straight back and then get turned in that direction. We'll put it right there.
Ground to cockpit, plan acknowledged. Call me through the menu when you are ready.
And we probably a long time ago should have welcomed our folks.
Ladies and gentlemen, the captain and crew would
We're
like
going to
to
shut
welcome
the
you
doors.
aboard this Boeing 757-200
We're going to get rid of the
airliner.
fuel truck
If you haven't
and the
already
gate
done so,
configuration.
please throw your
We still need the
carry-on
ground
luggage
power
underneath the seat in front
because
of
we
you
have not yet
or
cranked up
overhead.
the APU, which we're doing right
We
now.
will do everything
Hit this
possible to
button
make
and you
your
can
flight
see that your
comfortable
APU
and
is actually
enjoyable.
spinning up.
Explain.org, Step to Star, and FlightFactor wish you a pleasant
We're going to
flight
just
experience.
get everything ready while we wait. And I think we are about ready. We're not going to, oops, I left the radar on. I was going to say we're not going to turn the radar on until we get away from the ground crew because we don't want to subject them to radiation and cause them health conditions way down the road because we're not that kind of people. Looks like we're at 99. We're on APU. We can lose ground power. Don't forget to actually transfer off of ground power before you remove the ground power truck or you will ruin your ground power receptacle. And we're on APU. We should tell our guy we're ready for the pushback, right?
Ground to cockpit, tow is driving up.
We're going to go ahead and let them know the doors are closed and get them going on the safety
Ladies and
briefing.
gentlemen, we request your full attention as the flight attendants demonstrate the safety
And you
features
should
of
take
the
off with this one
When
at
the
10.
seatbelt sign illuminates,
Nautical mile
you must
view.
fasten your seatbelt
This
inside
one I
the
usually
buckle
let it
and
view a
tighten
little
the
further
belt
ahead.
by pulling on the loose end of the strap. To release your seatbelt, lift the upper portion of the buckle. We suggest that you keep your seatbelt fastened throughout the flight, as we may experience turbulence. The Boeing 757-200 airliner has 10
Is he coming? Oh, and I keep forgetting I'm flying in an unskinned aircraft. And yeah, our push cart is there.
Okay, all doors and hatches are closed, ready to connect.
If we need to evacuate the aircraft, floor level lighting will guide you towards the exit. Doors can be opened by moving the handle in the direction of
Getting in the engine start position with this screen viewed. Right, push this left button until you have both these views, because you're going to need N2 to properly start the engines in view. Once he's connected, he'll tell us it's okay to start the engines, and that's when we'll do that. We're going to reset the auto land system, because we're obviously not auto landing at this point.
So connected and bypass pin inserted. Release parking brake.
And then assist the other person. Keep your mask on until a uniformed crew member advises
And he wants
you
us to
remove
release parking brake. We should probably also remove our chocks.
Lean forward with your hands on top of your
And our
head.
brakes are
Starting
released.
pushback, and you may start engine.
Ensure your feet are flat on the floor.
And that's exactly what we're going to do. We have to view N2 there. And we're going to do the pilot's side first. Go to ground. Watch N2. I start it when it gets to about 23. If you start it too soon, that's an improper start. You'll overheat the engine while you're starting it, which will likely cause you problems down the road. Oil pressure. We see things happening. Exhaust gas temperature. If I had improperly started the engine, you'd see it way up here. That's not good. Good. RPM's coming up.
Calculators, CD players, laptop computers may be used when the seatbelt sign is off.
And pretty soon you'll see, I was going to say, you'll see the fail light go off there, and we can engage hydraulics on that side. And now we can do co-pilot engine number 2.
Tampering with, disabling,
Again,
destroying the smoke
monitoring
detectors
N2.
located in the lavatories is prohibited by law. You will find this and all the other safety information in the car, located in the seat pocket in front of you. We strongly
That'll be a
suggest you read it before takeoff. If
good
you have
start.
any questions, please don't hesitate
We should
to
see
ask one
the
of
same
our
oil
crew
pressure, same oil temps on both engines once they're both
members. Thank you.
started and idling. And now we'll see this go off because the generators are getting turned by the engine, and that light will go off because now the engine is generating electricity via the generator, and we can also close the right generator hydraulics. We no longer need
Operation complete. Set parking brake.
our APU. We can turn on our packs. And look at that. No warnings, everything's good. He wants us to set the brakes, so we did.
Disconnecting tow. Stand by.
We got our that's LGA. We got our departure up. We got our taxi airport diagram up. We're going to taxi from where we're at via Bravo to, yeah, we'll go all the way down here and line up here. And we'll let him disconnect and let him clear. And you'll see him finishing up his business, and he'll pull off to one side and give us hand signals, but
Tow is disconnected and bypass pin has been removed. Hand signal will be on the left. We'll see you next time. Have a safe flight.
alright. We'll wait for him to clear. He's saying that the hand signal will be on the right, so you'll see him pull away. Or did he say the left? I was going to say it would be very odd if he chose to go to the right. And he's clear. He's given us hand signals, which is great. Now we can put our radar, weather radar, on remove our brakes, and we're going to taxi by throttling up. I'm using the Cytec X52 system with the flight stick and a separate unit for the throttles. It kind of has a detent feeling that you feel when you get your engines above idle where they should be to taxi, and I can feel that. But it's approximately 40%. 45, I guess it is. And I said we're going to go via November, and we can see that. I'm sorry, we're going via Bravo. We can see that on our taxi diagram. It took me a long time to figure out. These signs all tell you where you're at. The black one tells me we are on Bravo right now. And if I wanted to go to Alpha 1, I should go that way. But I don't. This next sign is the black one, is where we're at. If I wanted to go to Zebra, that is crossing us is Zebra, and we don't. We're going to go down to Lima. We'll try to keep it under 15 ground speed while we taxi, because that is actually the limit. We should tell our crew that we're about to take off. You can get your charts from Navigraph within the tablet of this aircraft. I just find, for me, I like it better in Aviator's tablet. And Lima is right there. You can see the sign telling you, turn right for Lima. We really should be at under 10 knots ground speed before we make that 90-degree turn. And this is the end of the runway where we can get lined up. There's like some extra room at the end of runways so that jetliners like this have room to get lined up. This aircraft has very advanced avionics, flight management, computer, inertial navigation, GPS navigation, of course radio navigation, and very advanced autopilot, which can do everything including land the plane. But this plane is not equipped with an auto takeoff feature. And that's probably the only thing we're going to do by hand this entire flight. And in real life, I think they probably leverage the technology that's on the aircraft. Rather than shy away from it, the computer could probably fly the aircraft better than most humans can. There are conditions, though, where the human pilot does need to override and take control, because at the end of the day, humans, under certain circumstances, are smarter than computers. We're going to set the brakes. We're going to select LNAV and VNAV. We're not going to command them. We're going to make sure our auto throttle's on, our flight directors are on, everything's ready. Engines healthy. No reason to think they're not going to work as expected. Holding the brakes, we'll advance throttles to full. Push this thrust button, which will actually engage the auto throttle for takeoff, and I'm going to release the brakes. We know we're going to rotate at 131 because we did that in our FM FMC when we programmed it, you may recall. So I'm just keeping it straight down the runway until the airspeed hits 131. And we'll pull back. And we're airborne with positive rate. We're going to lift the landing gear, and then it will stop complaining about glide slope. Trim the aircraft for a good climb, maybe not 3,000 feet per second. Now we're at safe altitude, I think. To command the autopilot, maybe we'll go a little higher. We'll command the autopilot and let it take control. It now has both lateral and vertical navigation control, and it will follow our flight plan. And you may recall that our departure included some rather specific instructions on what we're supposed to do from runway 15R. And it knows those things, and it's doing it. That's why it's not full throttle right now. It's keeping airspeed down as per the departure procedures. And most departures around big cities do limit your airspeed and your rate of climb because of noise abatement. And I'm going to start putting flaps up at this point. It's still keeping airspeed down quite a bit. Flaps up one more notch. And that's the aircraft autopilot turning us and following that magenta line. And now flaps are going all the way up.
Ladies and gentlemen, our aircraft
I probably should have put these lights on to take off, but I forgot.
and all flights of our airline are non-smoking. For your safety, the
Just a
manager
quick
has
look
been
at things to make sure
Damaging
we're all
and
good.
disconnecting the smoke detectors is strictly prohibited. On the overhead panel you will find
Now I
a
usually
personal
go out
air conditioner and a flight attendant button. The lavatory for the business
to a little bit of a
passengers are located
more scaled out view, but for now, since we have this turn coming, we'll keep it at
in the back
20.
and center of the airplane.
And we can see
When seated,
our radar over there, and on this display I keep
even when the fasten
one
seat
side
sign
on
is
the
on.
traditional radar, the other side on the more advanced. So I have both systems going. Now this FMC over here, I usually leave it displaying the approach page. We're not there yet, but when we get there, we're going to need to know what's the proper landing speed, approach speed, if we have 30 degrees of flaps. And we can see, based on our weight configuration, the answer is 122 knots. We're going to need that later. Alright, and now he's climbing at a good rate. Looking at our FMC, I probably should have looked at our climb profile, but this got put in there by the stuff we programmed, and it's fine. You rarely want to override this. The cruise page has the flight level that we told it we wanted. It will automatically choose a speed for best economy. The descent profile, again, I've never overridden these. I suppose there are circumstances, but I haven't run across them yet. I like to view the legs here. And we're following the appropriate path around, and we will end up at Pat's. And we didn't have to really dive in and fully understand everything that's here, but I mean, the pilot is responsible for knowing what the procedures are, the published procedures, and following them. And I was going to say we need our charts up for LaGuardia, but we already got the LaGuardia arrival up. And if we scroll out, we can see where our aircraft is, even though it's not quite on this page yet. And we're barely going to hit 25,000, and then it's going to be time to descend. Speaking of that, scroll this out so that it shows some distance. And there's our end of our departure. There's our top of climb. So we're going to reach our climb altitude there. The autopilot will level off and establish cruise speed at that point. It's probably time to go ahead and change to standard 2992. Oop, 2992. And we gotta do both sides. It's not. No, that's right, Pats, and then it's going to go to BAF, and we can see that by scrolling out further. Pats ends, then we go to BAF, and there's our top of descent. So like I said, we're not going to have a very long stretch where we're at cruise, and then this is that arrival and our descent. We don't have any moisture in the clouds. I'm not going to have to worry about anti-ice engine and wing. Here they are. If I had any red activity, weather activity, I would certainly want to. Yeah, we get red stuff on here, but I don't worry about that too much. It's when it's red on this more advanced system that you know there's moisture, and you'd be taking a big risk by not using your engine anti-ice and your wing anti-ice. Why wouldn't you want to do that? Well, it does take some power, as well as cause wear and tear on those systems. Yeah, tilt that radar. I'm looking at the co-pilot's display. Tilt the radar until you've got the band as wide as it can possibly be. It's not going to fill the whole screen, because there's kind of like a cone from the nose of the aircraft where the radar can hit. That's probably where I'd leave it, right there. Almost at 18,000. Was our transition altitude. And now we are headed basically west. So we're gonna, because this departure took us this way, and now since here we've finally been headed in the direction we want to go. I'm going to go ahead and close that chart, as well as the whole KBOS. So we know we've got the arrival up. We know at some point we're also going to want an airport diagram, so I get that ready as well. And we know we're going to need an approach, but we don't know which one yet, so we'll just hold on to that. Now as we approach BAF, it's going to want to descend. And at that time, if I don't do something, it's not going to descend. And what do I have to do? I have to give it permission to descend by changing this MCP altitude over here. I can do that now, I think. No. Actually, I don't think I should do it now, because we're still climbing. We haven't reached it yet. And it won't climb to 25,000 if I do that. But as soon as we get to 25,000, I'm going to change it to show you what it does, or more specifically what it doesn't do, which is nothing at that point. Monitoring engine stuff. Oil pressures are equal and within range. Oil temperatures are equal and within range. Sometimes you'll find that one of these might start to climb. Your job is to notice that and act, as well as continuously scan and all the systems. If you started your engine improperly, there's a good chance that about this point in flight you'd see one of these starting to overheat. And there's whole procedures that you follow when one engine starts overheating, which would involve returning that engine to idle and seeing if it decreases, and if not, shutting it down. And there's also procedures for dealing with it if it loses thrust or catches fire. We're not going to go over all of those scenarios now, except to acknowledge that they exist. And as a virtual pilot in this aircraft, you should know what those procedures are and be able to do them. But even more importantly, you should know how to start the engines so that you lower your chances of ever having to do them. And now we're almost at our cruise altitude, and we'll see our fine and dandy autopilot will level us off. We're at 0.67 Mach right now. Watch, that number will probably climb as we level off, and his target should be 0.77 probably. Cruise, yep, 0.77 is the target. I don't think they'll hit that on this short of a flight, but we'll see. And now we're leveled off. The announcements improve the immersion. Now I have to adjust this tilt again now that we're leveled off. The aircraft is literally at a different angle of attack, so and real quickly we'll go ahead and give them some soda pops. But you know, you don't get the whole can. We'll pour you a portion of it for your $1,200 fee. Alright, and here we are at 0.77 Mach, which is our target cruise speed, and that's why our autopilot is dialing back the throttles. We continue to monitor, oversee that the autopilot is doing what it should. All the systems are doing what they should. You always want to keep an eye here and here, because things that happen that shouldn't will pop up here as well as over here. Engines look good. So while we cruise, we'll just talk about some of the systems. You've got hydraulics. Obviously, all of the movable parts that steer the aircraft are driven by hydraulics. So your hydraulic system is important. And we have electrical-driven hydraulic pumps, and we have engine-driven hydraulic pumps. And we've got two of each, because obviously the hydraulic system is that important. And over here I think you can see the hydraulic pressure as well as hydraulic fuel quantities. And that's why you do maintenance before flights, so that they top off the hydraulic fluid. Otherwise, you may lose hydraulic pressure during flight and then crash because you can't control the aircraft, possibly. Yaw damper is just part of the system that keeps the aircraft flying straight. You don't really have to do much with it. Our power panel, which we used to transition from ground power to APU power, and then finally we're now on generator power. Don't open these. They're covered with glass for a reason, so that you can't just bump them and press them. You don't press these, except the only time you do is if you ever need to physically sever the generators from the engines. Why would you do that? If there's a severe engine problem or severe generator problem, you might want to do that. But guess what? Once you push that button, yeah, it's a ruined engine and or generator. And so don't push those. Don't fly with your APU on. You'll burn extra fuel. That's not good. Fuel pumps quantity is here. Make sure you're balanced. Should be. If it's not balanced at this point, there might be a problem, and you can cross-feed fuel to try to keep the fuel balanced. Obviously, and we see we're off a little bit, and the reason is because the APU draws from the left system, and we ran the APU a little bit while we were on the ground. Not much, but we see a bit of a difference, so we're going to go ahead and cross-feed for a little bit. And we'll get a warning. Oh, FMC. See how this popped up? It's the FMC needs our attention for something. Reset MCP altitude. I said we were going to talk about that, and then I totally forgot. It knows we're getting close to the top of descent, and I have not yet given it permission to descend. And I do that by putting this lower. Notice it won't descend now. It's following the VNAV profile that's programmed in, and the top of the descent is here. But this acts as an override. Until I lower this, the system doesn't consider itself allowed to descend. And there's good reason for that, if you think about it. And I'm going to let it go all the way down to 5. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to go all the way down to 5. It's going to follow the VNAV profile. It's going to descend as is appropriate for this arrival. And you notice it says at Nabi, expect to be at 8,000. So our system is going to descend us to 8,000 by the time we get to Nabi. And then you notice there's altitude of 4,000 here. Between Rhymes and this one is 4,000, and then finally at the end of this approach we're supposed to be at 3,000. And by putting this, I'm going to put it all the way down to 3. I've given the system permission to descend as per that arrival all the way down to 3. And we're about to start descending, so we should probably button up the cabin and the people. You'll notice our throttles are down, but we're not descending yet. He's getting airspeed down to begin descent. When I say he, I mean our autopilot. We're going to go ahead and view a little further out. And now we probably are about to start descending, so we'll brief for that. Now we keep an eye out because we're probably going to have to apply the speed brakes in order to keep our airspeed where it needs to be. And Where does it need to be? Well, that was this descent page over here. 0.73 Mach. Or 265. Yep, that's where it's at, right here, 265. And it's coming down, so it's able to not overspeed the plan without using the speed brakes at this point. Here's the speed brakes. And we'll see if it becomes necessary. Our FMC will tell us. Alright, so while we descend and we're on our way here, we're going to look at this approach a little more. You see there's a few points here where you might typically be told to hold. We might do one just to kind of demo it, but we're not going to do more than that. And you can envision, I mean, what is an arrival? It's an agreed upon way of funneling aircraft from several directions here, all into this New York airspace, to start lining them up and stacking them so that everybody gets their turn at landing. So you might be asked to hold because the aircraft in front of you is slower or whatever, and air traffic control will instruct you to hold so that there is spacing. If you really get good at this, you should fly on VATSIM with air traffic control enthusiasts and other pilots in the airspace as well, of course. Oh, and I put us on this screen to look at hydraulic pressure, and I never put this back, so we're not looking at engine metrics, engine health metrics. Looking good. Oh, we didn't talk about pressurization system. If I didn't have the pressurization system running, we'd have already blacked out and passed out, and we'd have crashed. As the altitude gains altitude, above, say, 12,000 feet, I think, the aircraft has to be pressurized. Otherwise, we can't breathe. And the way that's done is bleed air is taken from the bleed air system. Literally is pulling aircraft from the outside in. And that also feeds the engines, but it also feeds the pressurization system. So if we didn't have our packs on, we'll turn one off for a second. We'll see. Probably something pop up and say, the packs are off. Oh, nothing did. Yeah, it probably would if I left it there for a while, but we're not going to do that. And since the packs are on and this is in auto, and I put the rate to auto, and I put the landing altitude in, I really don't have to pay attention too much to pressurization. It'll take care of itself. HF radio is not really important. Window heat, fly with that on, otherwise your windows will fog up. Here are your signs. No smoking and seat belts. Lights and stuff here. We already looked at the APU earlier when we started it. It certainly seems overwhelming when you step into the cockpit, but it really isn't that difficult once you get used to it. You've got on the center console radios and your navigation radios and stuff. Nothing down here that you have to interact with too much. You've seen me adjust the radar a little bit from time to time here. A little bit for, yeah, we interact with the FMCs a lot, and you've seen me change the distance here a lot. And you haven't seen me yet, but you know, we're in map mode. We're going to switch to approach mode at some point, but we've been in map mode the whole flight. 30 throttles, stabilizer trim, flaps over there, rudder trim here, aileron trim here. And then on the panel you've got your displays, your MFDs and PFDs on your airspeeds and vertical speeds, altitudes, clock. Never noticed that was there, to be honest with you. Another altimeter. Why too? Well, for redundancy, that's very important. And you've got one over here too, so you've really got 3 of them. Your artificial horizon, you don't even look at it unless your EADI happens to go out. You use this, but the day might come where you have to go back to using the mechanical. And then this is all about autopilot and navigation controls. And in this demo we've covered takeoff, departure, cruising, arrival, and descending, and shortly we're going to go through an actual approach and landing. And it may even be an autopilot coupled landing. We have to wait and see what runway we get, because some of them, that is not authorized. And we're crossing through 14.5 right now. Look at our legs. Cache is the next point, and it's going to have us at 11,677 feet by cache, and Navi it's going to have us at 9677. Why that instead of 8,000? Probably because our altimeter isn't yet set to the real. Oh, did we even tune our ATIS? No, we didn't. Arrival, ATIS 125.95. I would explain why we're not getting ATIS. 125.95, and turn the audio on. We're still far enough away, I don't think we're going to pick it up, but one of the nice things about Aviator's tablet is you can also get KLGA. These are all your frequencies, but if you scroll down you get the METARs. So we can get our altimeter from here and set it, and it's 3,000. And you got to do both sides, otherwise you get a warning about a difference. 3,000, right? Now it won't tell us, I don't think it tells us what runway's in use, but the winds are 050 at 10 knots. So I would guess we're probably going to get runway 040. We'll wait and see, but if we do, let's look at it. Go to approach, runway 4. That's going to be an approach coming from basically the south. And we're coming in from the north, so it's not like a straight in approach. And here's our ATIS. Let's listen. We're going to get runway 31.
Visibility more than 10. Sky conditions 25,000 broken. Temperature 28.
Which is actually good because runway 04 would not even only be a little bit out of the way, but it also autopilot coupled approach is not authorized. So I wouldn't be able to fly the autopilot coupled approach. So I'm not going to complain that we're not getting runway 04. We're getting 13. We're going to be coming in
2000 Zulu
from the
weather.
north.
Wind 160 at 1/4.
Then we're going to come
Visibility
here
more than 10.
and we're going to land.
Sky
And look,
conditions 25,000 broken.
there's nothing
Temperature
here
2,
saying that we cannot
wind
use
20.
an autopilot
Altimeter
coupled
2996.
approach.
Arriving runway 31. Departing runway 31.
And
Advise on
we can
initial
turn
contact.
that off now. And I said we were going to do a hold. We'll hold at this one, I think. And it's saying drag required and I missed it. But I heard the engines are all the way down. That's because the descent rate. Now I got the speed brake all the way out, but now it's throttling up. I want to ease off the speed brakes until the throttles go back down. Because if I have the speed brakes out so much that now it wants to throttle to maintain the speed, well, now I'm just kind of burning unnecessary fuel. Let's look at our holds. We'll say we're going to hold at CMK. We haven't executed it yet. Let's put it in and look at our legs. CMK is our, I couldn't do knobby because we were just about to pass it. So now on our legs we see a hold at CMK. And we see it on our screen. So we just pretend that ATC had told us that we're going to hold at CMK. And it's going to do that. So the procedure is you go to Rhymes, then you go to Harp and Crawley, and then from Crawley you should expect vectors to the approach. And since we're not flying in a VATSIM environment, we're just going to kind of pretend and vector ourselves. Which basically means chart our own path to get from point A to point B. Vector. Victor vector? Anybody remember that? You're probably as old as I am. And now we're about to do that hold. I'm going to see if I can ease up on the speed brakes. Because like I said, if your speed brakes are out far enough that the engines are not at idle, you're just burning extra fuel. And now we're in this hold, and we're probably not going to descend while in the hold, so I'm definitely not going to need the speed brakes during the hold. FMC is telling me otherwise though, but it was saying drag required. I noticed that because I had an FMC light and I looked at it down here, but now it's not saying drag is required. And when you say see drag required on the FMC, that means that you have to create drag using the speed brakes. It has nothing to do with gender choices. Because, you know, everything these days has to be related somehow to social and political issues and agendas, right? No. No, we'll continue creating resistance to airflow in the field of aerodynamics. We'll continue to call that drag. doesn't mean we're bigoted. It just means that the word means something to us in a totally different context. If you think that's bigotry on my part, well, you're the one assigning that meaning, not me. Anyhow, enough about that. Back to flying. We need to give a little bit of a better view on the co-pilot side, don't we? I was gonna say, yeah, it went in the wrong direction for this hold. I probably had to change something and I didn't. So air traffic control probably wouldn't be too happy with me right now. And when we get headed back around and headed back to CMK, I think the default direction is to hold right, which is what we've done, but maybe they draw it this way on the diagrams because it's less clutter. So maybe we didn't do it wrong. Alright, and you notice our route ends at Crawley. It's time to start thinking about putting an approach in here. I'm going to put it in between Harp and Crawley. We're going to go to the departures and arrivals, KLGA arrivals, and we're going to put in, what is it, runway 22? 13. Yeah, 13. We could do RNAV, but I'd kind of set out to do a auto-coupled. There's ILS 13 right there. But we don't want to do it yet. Otherwise it may overwrite this and go straight there, and we don't want to do that. Alright, now, I'm pretty sure if I didn't do anything, it might keep holding. So, I'm going to tell it we're done holding by, let me do that again. When I click rhymes here, watch, it'll copy rhymes there. And now I paste it here. That's like saying, oh, it says I can't do that. Well, that's odd. Let's see what it does. If it continues to hold, we'll interject. In the meantime, I'm going to put our heading on where we're headed so that I can hit this button if it does start to turn and do another hold. Now, as a pilot of this very advanced aircraft, I should know that, know how it works, but I've honestly never played with the hold feature here. And it's gonna do another hold. So we're gonna override that. Watch, now it's gonna continue on 75. And we didn't veer off course for long enough that it should really upset air traffic control too much. And we're going to say direct to rhymes. So we're going to hit the direct button, hit rhymes, and then hit this, and then hit exec, and watch. See, now it's rhymes is the next point, and now we can go back to LNAV and VNAV mode. And here we are down to 3,000 at Crawley. It's going to go to 4021. I wonder why that is. We'll put 240/3,000 in that slot right there. And now we'll do that instead. And since these are basically in line, I'm going to line up my heading with that heading. Drag required. You put the drag while you watch the airspeed. Airspeed's dropping. Not fast enough, so we're going to put more drag. We want it to stabilize at the 240, but we don't want throttling to come up because that's just burning fuel for no good reason. Now we're on this heading. We're going to go on heading mode while we program, select our ILS 13 and hit execute. And it's telling me all kinds of things. Look at our, okay, there's route discontinuity, so we're just going to move Pay Me to be the first. And as soon as we get to Crawley, we're going to proceed to Pay Me. And in real life or in VATSIM, you'd follow what ATC says at this point, but we're gonna vector ourselves. So we're gonna go back into LNAV mode and watch. It's gonna steer to Pay Me, and it knows per this approach we should be at 2,800 feet at Pay Me. So we're looking good there. We're going to go ahead and say that we're going to land.
Ladies and gentlemen, in a few minutes our aircraft will land at the destination airport.
I haven't given it permission.
We ask you to remain seated until the aircraft comes to a complete stop and the fasten seatbelt.
It would not have descended to 2,800 if I hadn't told it it's allowed.
Your personal belongings with you. Attention international travelers, if you are continuing your flight, follow the signs to
We're going to take away the speed brake because we're burning extra fuel for no good reason. And here we are, headed straight for Pay Me, and we've got some things to be aware of here, but we're not anywhere near 600 feet to the ground, so we're good. And you can see the New York skyline is coming into view. I do have the New York area scenery and the New York airports by Drizwiki Designs. Highly recommend it. And at Pay Me, I'd like to be slower. Oh, it already says 170. That should work. As I get close to the approach, I've got a lot to think about. Not just making sure that the autopilot intercepts the course, and you're going to see me switch from LNAV and VNAV to approach mode, and get on the localizer and glide slope path and supervise the aircraft while it auto lands. But I've also got to get the aircraft down from 240 knots to the landing approach speed, which we said is with 30-degree flaps is 120 knots. And we're going to go ahead and tell this thing that that is what we're going to do. I don't think it matters, really. in the simulation. Maybe in real life it does. But since the paying waypoint has 170 as the airspeed, shortly before that you're going to hear the throttles get cut, and you're going to see the target airspeed go down from 240 to 170. And it's at that point that I can start pulling out the flaps. If I pull out the flaps now, we're going to overspeed the flaps. That's not something we should be trying to do. When you overspeed the flaps or any of the aircraft's maneuvering limits, you know, that's not good. Physical damage to the aircraft can happen, and you lose control and you crash, or the hull splits open, who knows. Wing falls off. See, it just changed. It might even tell me the drag is required. But even though it's not, I want to get our airspeed down sooner rather than later. Now we're under 240, so we can go one notch of flaps. And we're about to go under 220, we just did. So I can go 2 notches of flaps. When we get under 210, I can go to that 3rd notch of flaps. And we're going to be able to go to the next notch soon. We're going to be able to get all the way to 25 before we ever have to turn on to pay me, and that's good. And we're under 190 now, so we can go 2 more notches. Now if I go to 30 degrees flaps without the gear down, it's going to set off the warning, because that's not an appropriate flying configuration. So we're not going to do that. I should dial in the ILS. Easiest way to do this is just like that. That sets the frequencies, and I think it even sets that. No, it didn't. We want that on 135. Whoop. No, I was going to say we're steering the aircraft, but no, it's just happens to be time. 134 actually, for the autopilot to turn. Now we're going to go in approach mode here. We're going to put the gear out, the landing lights and whatnot. We're going to put the automatic brakes, and we're ready. I think this is our runway here. And I'm about to go to approach mode. Oh my, we're above the altimeter. Not the altimeter, we're above the glide slope. I've made an error here, because I didn't tell it was allowed to descend any further. We're way too high. The right thing to do would probably be to do a go around, but we're going to see if we can save this landing. Look at it trying to get under the glide slope, because I can't go into approach mode until we're under. There, I hit it. You gotta turn on all 3 systems, and eventually it's gonna give me speed control here, and we're gonna go to 120 knots, didn't we say? Yep, 120. When that opens up right there. Oh, I don't have full flaps out. We oversped the flaps just momentarily. Our land 3 is on, that's good. Here we just got control.
1,000.
So we're selecting 120, which is an appropriate airspeed. It's following glide slope, it's following light. Localizer auto land 3 status is good. It's coming down to 120. It's throttling up because it's getting close to the target airspeed. And from an external, you know, that's the appropriate attack angle. And what we're going to do is just when the wheels hit the ground, I'm going to disengage autopilot.
500.
But autopilot coupled landing is approved here, and we're in an aircraft that has the appropriate equipment, and it is FAA certified to do this, so it's not cheating. But as a pilot, I do need to know how to hand fly an approach, because it's not always authorized and your systems aren't always working. Here we go. Looking good. There's no reason to take minimums. Means you've reached the point now where you're landing whether you want to or not. Although I've aborted from a landing beneath minimums. Here we go, and watch now.
50,
Now it's on
40,
flare.
30, 20, 10.
Watch vertical as we get close to the ground, and I said we'd do that. I'll be darned if the autopilot didn't bounce us. That's odd. I'm not quite convinced yet that there's not some updates that need to be done to make the FlightFactor 757 truly compatible with 11.5, X-Plane 11.5. Because I've flown this aircraft a lot and I've never seen autopilot bounce the aircraft. And we had the right speed. And earlier, before I was recording, I saw some weirdness too. It actually brought the aircraft down on the wrong radial, not even aligned with the runway. So maybe it's the scenery, maybe it's... Anyway, when you're running a beta of anything, you know that you're going to experience oddities. It's to be expected. Alright, and we never made the announcement about staying in your seat and all that good stuff.
Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you at our destination. The local weather is hot and rainy, 27 degrees centigrade. The local time is 4:30 p.m. For your safety and comfort, we ask that you please remain seated with your seatbelt fastened until the captain turns off the fasten seatbelt sign.
We're going to go to the terminals down there.
That we have parked at the gate and that it is safe to move about. Please check around your seat for any personal belongings you may have brought on board with you, and please use caution when opening the overhead bins, as heavy articles may have shifted around during the flight. If you require departing assistance,
Another thing I've noticed is getting the aircraft to stop when you're parking at the gate. I'm pretty sure there are some issues with that too. Speed brakes don't need to be on anymore.
I'd like to thank you for joining us on this trip.
We should put our radar in non-transmit mode.
Have a nice day.
We'll take this spot on the end. Maybe our brakes are still hot from landing and that's why it wouldn't stop before, but we'll see what happens now. In real life, we'd have some marshallers. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. See, now it's stopped. No problem. But we need to come forward a little. See, I'm holding the brakes and nothing. Parking brake. Nothing. I think we've got brake temperatures and whatnot here. Yeah, no, they're not overheated. Yeah, I think there's some things that need to be tweaked with this particular aircraft. Well, at least we didn't hit the building, which is what happened the other day, and I was not too impressed with that. Alright, now that we're here, we need to get from the ground up, so we need shocks, we need a ground power unit, we need gate config. Alright, now that we've got a ground power unit, you see it says available there. Now we're on ground power. Now when we cut the engines, we won't lose power. Cut the engines, cut the fuel. Turn off these lights. Uh-oh. I'm pushing buttons, but nothing's happening. I think the sim is gonna crash. Like I said, when you're running a beta, anything can happen. And it just did. Alright, well, we were going to power down the aircraft. That's no big deal. Well, thank you for watching. Hopefully this has been entertaining and helpful. And have a good day, folks.